Harkin was pushing through the trees, marching toward the darker parts of the forest. "My son is alive. That's all that matters." He waited till he was far enough into the dark forest before he leaned his head back and roared as loud as he could till his throat was raw, his arms thrown out to the side. The sound carried for miles, and for a moment the jungle grew quiet, absorbing the sorrow, before returning to its own kind of symphony. Ausonia stood at the foot of Correk's bed watching him sleep. She tucked a long strand of hair behind her slender, pointed ear, brushing a tear off her cheek. A worried expression floated across her face as she fingered the edge of the soft, moss-green cotton throw covering him. "You almost died," she whispered, her throat tight. She was doing her best not to wake him. The walls and ceiling of Correk's room at the top of the castle were all visible, darkening the room. A spell was cast when Correk first got home to keep them visible and darken the windows. Everything but the window at the very top. His favorite. Ausonia looked up at the glass cupola in time to see a carrier pigeon fly overhead carrying an engraved envelope. The first postal run of the morning was underway. An ordinary day. The morning sunlight was visible through the window, but the spell made sure it didn't stream into the room. She had been making the journey up a series of staircases for months, checking on him. A series of altrea extendia as she took every step hoping that was the day he would open his eyes. He still didn't know she was ever there. She was there when they carried him up from the dark forest, the day he was brought home from the battlefield. The gnomes were carrying him on a stretcher, not saying a word. Param pushed everyone aside and gently took Correk into his arms, carrying him up to the castle. Correk didn't even stir. Ausonia had felt her heart beating harder as she clutched the side of her pale yellow gown, silently watching Param whispering a spell as he carried his best friend. Correk had been limp, and his normally pale skin was ashen. Queen Saria sent in the most learned light elves who had been practicing the art of healing for hundreds of years. All they could do was make him comfortable and make sure the wounds healed properly. Time was having to do the rest of it. Over the next few months, Ausonia found her way to Correk's room and stood by his bed. She took to whispering one-sided conversations with Correk, telling him everything she had wanted to say to him all the years she had known him, but never once took the chance and said anything. "There's time," she whispered. "That's what I always told myself. There's time." She swallowed hard, licking her lips. "Until there almost wasn't." She sat down gently on the edge of the bed. "The prophets are holding together by a thread. There are whispers everywhere that they knew all along about Rosden. Some think she's hiding out in the dark market, but Param said there's no sign of her. I see him standing on the edge of the forest watching the castle. He won't come in, won't tell me why. He keeps a lot of secrets, even for a wood elf." Ausonia looked around the room, letting out a deep sigh. "A woman from Earth came to see you. Someone named Mara. I think she's related to that detective. The king spoke to her and said you were getting better." She looked at his sleeping face and brushed her fingers against his cheek. "He sent her home, or at least he tried to. They seemed to know each other, and it didn't look completely friendly. Stubborn woman. Must be the human part of her. I saw her heading toward the dark market." She stood up and smoothed out the front of her dress. "I have to get going, but I'll be back. You know, if you would wake up, I could stop coming back so often and get a few other things done." "Leira." Correk's eyelids fluttered. Ausonia stood perfectly still, holding her breath. "Leira." He struggled to lift his hand, a fiery symbol drifting across the back of his hand and fading away. Ausonia read the brief symbol and squeezed her eyes shut. He was still trying to change the direction of a fireball away from Leira. "That's what almost killed you. You were saving Leira." It wasn't the first time she saw the symbols flitter across his skin.